Welcome to today's video. Imagine a world thousands of years ago, where human civilization was just beginning to take shape, and ancient people started asking life's biggest questions. Who are we? Why are we here? And what force governs the universe? Today, we dive into one of the most mysterious, complex, and oldest religions in the world. Trust me, the origins, beliefs, and practices will blow your mind. Let's uncover the fascinating story of the world's oldest religion. What if we've been wrong about how religion started? It's easy to assume it all began with temples and priests, but what if the roots of faith stretch back much further, long before cities, agriculture, or written language even existed? The earliest evidence of religious practice doesn't come from towering cathedrals or ancient pyramids. It comes from caves. Yes, caves. Let's dive into shamanism, the oldest known form of spiritual practice, going back at least 30,000 years. Just imagine, long before humans settled down to farm or build cities, they were already performing complex rituals. What does that tell us? That humans have always been deeply connected to something beyond the physical world, or at least they believed they were. Archaeological finds from places like the Lascaux caves in France reveal stunning images of figures wearing animal skins and antlers. But these weren't just hunters showing off their kills. These were shamans, spiritual leaders who were thought to communicate with the spirit world. Here's where it gets fascinating. Shamans didn't just pray, they became the animals, the spirits, the forces of nature themselves. Through trance-like states, they claimed to step into another reality. So, were they visionaries tapping into something real, or were they simply delusional? That's a question we still wrestle with today. What's even more intriguing is that shamanistic practices weren't limited to one area of the world. You can find evidence of similar rituals in Siberia, North America, South Africa, and Australia. These cultures had no contact with each other, yet they all engaged in some form of shamanism. Is that a mere coincidence, or does it hint at something deeper within the human mind? Shamans didn't just offer spiritual guidance. They wielded immense power over their people. They decided when to hunt, when to move, and even, at times, who would live or die, based on their communications with the spirit world. Were these early humans simply in awe of the natural world around them, or were they truly in touch with something beyond it? Were early humans being guided by faith, or manipulated by individuals claiming divine connections? Imagine living in a world where someone tells you, if we don't make this sacrifice, the spirits will take your child. Is that really faith, or is it madness? And then there's the use of hallucinogenic plants. Many shamans entered altered states of consciousness by using natural substances. Today, we'd call that drug use maybe even psychosis. But in ancient times, it was seen as a doorway to another realm. Does that make their experiences any less real? Or are we too quick to dismiss what we can't scientifically explain? There's also the question of survival. Did shamanism help early humans make sense of a chaotic and terrifying world? Or did it trap them in a cycle of superstition and fear? If you believed that spirits controlled the weather, your food supply, and your health, how much control did you really have over your own life? You were at the mercy of forces you couldn't see, couldn't touch, and couldn't prove. And yet, this was the foundation for what would eventually become modern religion. From those cave rituals to the rise of polytheism and monotheism, shamanism was the seed. But what does that mean for us today? Is that seed the root of all human spirituality? Or does it prove that, from the very beginning, religion was based on irrational fears, on a desperate need to explain the unexplainable? Some argue that these early humans were tapping into something real, an unseen realm we've lost touch with in our modern, scientifically driven world. Others believe shamanism was the first step down a long path of delusion, a primitive form of control that's persisted for millennia. When we talk about ancient civilizations, we often mention the Maya for their remarkable achievements, massive pyramids, and a calendar so precise that it sparked an apocalypse scare in 2012. But long before that, the spiritual foundations of shamanism were already shaping how humans understood the world around them. Let's cut through the awe of the Maya's advanced mathematics and stunning cities for a moment and dive into something much darker: their obsession with human sacrifice. Yes, the Maya didn't just leave behind breathtaking architecture, they left a legacy soaked in blood. And lots of it. Here's the thing. For the Maya, sacrifice wasn't just some ceremonial tradition, it was a matter of survival. They believed their gods had created the world and kept it running, but there was a catch. The gods needed something in return: human blood. Without it, they feared the sun would stop rising, the rains would cease, and their crops would wither. This wasn't sacrifice for the sake of cruelty. They believed they were literally keeping the universe from collapsing. The Maya believed their gods gave life through their own blood, so in their eyes, human blood was the only fitting way to repay the gods. And when we talk about human sacrifice, we're not talking about a quiet, hidden ritual. No, this was a massive public event. Picture this: towering stone pyramids packed with onlookers, the pounding of drums echoing through the air, and at the top, a priest plunging a blade into a living, breathing human. All of it was done with the belief that this brutal act was necessary to maintain cosmic balance. And here's the shocking part: they didn't just sacrifice prisoners of war. Sure, captives were the obvious choice, but sometimes the Maya took it even further. They sacrificed their own elites, people of high status, even kings and priests. Imagine that, your ruler, the person who leads your society, being offered up to the gods. That's not just faith. That's faith taken to an extreme we can barely wrap our minds around today. But why did they believe it was necessary? The Maya saw the world as constantly teetering on the edge of disaster. They believed everything: sunlight, rain, even the fertility of the soil depended on keeping the gods satisfied. And that meant blood. The Maya's cosmology was built on cycles of creation and destruction, life and death, with human beings as the currency that kept the gods' favor. It's a terrifying worldview. How do you argue with a religion that says, if we don't spill blood, the universe might collapse? Let's break down the logistics. Human sacrifice wasn't rare. It was a regular part of life, performed at major events, from the crowning of a new king to the dedication of a temple. Even the famous Maya ball game, where teams tried to knock a rubber ball through a stone hoop, was more than just a sport, it was a death match. The losers, and sometimes even the winners, were often sacrificed. That's right, their national pastime had a body count. Some argue that human sacrifice wasn't as common as it seems, that it was reserved for specific high-stakes occasions. But archaeological evidence tells a different story. We're talking about skeletons with their hearts cut out, decapitated skulls, and inscriptions depicting priests with blood-soaked hands. It's clear that human sacrifice was central to Maya religious life. But here's the question: was this devotion to the gods, or a society spiraling into madness? And consider this, it wasn't a short-lived phase. The Maya civilization thrived for nearly 2 millennia, and human sacrifice was part of that entire journey. In their eyes, it was working. Their crops were growing, their cities were expanding, and they became one of the most dominant civilizations in Mesoamerica. In their minds, the blood was doing its job. So, is this the ultimate example of faith? Or is it a chilling reminder of just how far humans will go to maintain control over forces they don't understand? Here's the real kicker. This wasn't just about survival, it was about power. The Maya elite controlled the rituals, and by performing these sacrifices, they reinforced their authority. Think about it. If you're the one performing the rituals that supposedly keep the world from collapsing, who's going to question your power? If you're the guy who talks to the gods and ensures the sun rises tomorrow, people are definitely going to listen to you. But does that make the whole situation any less insane? Were the Maya genuinely serving the gods? Or were they exploiting a fear-driven belief system to maintain power over the masses? It's easy for us to look back and dismiss their practices as barbaric, But for the Maya, this was life. This was the price of survival in a world they believed was fragile and easily tipped into chaos. Their entire cosmology demanded sacrifice, and without it, everything could fall apart. So where does that leave us? Was Mayan human sacrifice an act of ultimate devotion, showing just how far people would go to ensure their world's survival? Or was it a tragic example of how belief systems can spiral into horrifying extremes? When we think about the gods of ancient civilizations, we often envision wise and benevolent beings overseeing the world. But take the Sumerians, for example, the creators of one of the earliest known religions. Their pantheon was anything but peaceful or sane by today's standards. These gods weren't just overseeing the natural order, they were erratic, emotional, and sometimes downright terrifying. Let's start with Anu, the king of the gods. You'd think he'd be a wise ruler, right? Well, not exactly. Anu was a god of the sky who mostly distanced himself from the affairs of humans and other gods. Yet his influence was massive, holding absolute authority over life and death. Anu's detachment, combined with his occasional interventions, made him an unpredictable figure. The Sumerians lived in fear of his whims, constantly wondering when he might rain down a plague or drought. Is this the kind of deity you'd trust? Or does he sound more like an unstable force you'd be scared to upset? Then there's Enlil, the god of wind, storms, and chaos, Anu's right-hand deity, if you will. Enlil's story is a wild ride of destruction and power plays. He once became so enraged with humanity that Enlil, the god of wind and storms, was so furious with humanity that he unleashed a flood to wipe everyone out. A story that might sound familiar if you've heard of Noah's Ark. But here's the twist. In Sumerian mythology, Enlil wasn't saving anyone or offering redemption. He was just angry and didn't want to deal with humanity's noise anymore. Total destruction was his solution. But Enlil isn't the only volatile figure in this pantheon. Enter Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and fertility, a truly fascinating character who's both alluring and terrifying. Inanna wasn't just about beauty and attraction. She was also a fierce warrior goddess known for her ruthless ambitions. In one of her boldest moves, she even attempted to overthrow the underworld and challenge its ruler, Ereshkigal, in what can only be described as a dramatic power grab. Inanna's mythology is filled with betrayal, vengeance, and outright insanity, often leaving death and destruction in her wake. Here's the kicker. These weren't just mythological tales for the Sumerians. They believed their gods were very real and had a direct influence on their daily lives. Imagine living in a society where every natural disaster, illness, or personal tragedy could be attributed to a god's whim. Does that sound like the kind of divine order you'd expect from higher beings? Or does it feel more like a system built on fear and unpredictability? What's even more intriguing is how these gods mirror human emotions and flaws. They were jealous, petty, and often cruel. If you think the modern concept of God is based on benevolence and justice, the Sumerian gods stand in stark contrast. These deities weren't concerned with fairness or morality. They acted out of self-interest, often to the detriment of humanity. And yet, the Sumerians offered their loyalty, prayers, and sacrifices to these unpredictable figures. Was this a desperate attempt to maintain order in a chaotic world? Or were they merely victims of divine manipulation? The Sumerians also believed in the importance of maintaining balance with these gods, but that balance was always precarious. The gods didn't hesitate. The Sumerian gods were a fickle bunch. They would bring disaster if they felt disrespected or ignored. Enlil's flood wasn't just a one-off event. Plagues, storms, and warfare were all seen as divine punishments for human misdeeds. But here's the irony. The gods themselves were often the ones acting irresponsibly. We could look at this and say the Sumerians were trying to make sense of a chaotic world, a world where natural disasters, disease, and war felt like random, uncontrollable forces. Instead of viewing these events as part of a natural order, they attributed them to the whims of erratic gods. Or perhaps there's something deeper here. Could the Sumerian gods symbolize human rulers, projecting the flaws and fears of ancient kings onto their deities? If the gods were selfish, cruel, and unpredictable, maybe it's because the Sumerians were living under rulers who were exactly the same. Now, let's shift our focus to the grandeur of ancient Egypt, the pharaohs, the pyramids, the mummies. But beneath all that splendor lies something far more bizarre: the Egyptians' obsession with the afterlife. And when I say obsession, I mean they lived and died for it literally. The Egyptians didn't just believe in an afterlife. They envisioned an incredibly complex one, filled with gods, monsters, trials, and some seriously strange rituals. For them, death wasn't an end. It was the beginning of a treacherous journey through the underworld, a journey that only the wealthy and well-prepared could hope to survive. So how did they prepare for this daunting journey? By spending most of their lives building elaborate tombs, hoarding treasures, and mummifying their bodies with such precision that their techniques are still studied by scientists today. But here's the question: were they simply planning for an afterlife, or were they prisoners of an irrational fear? The ancient Egyptian concept of the soul was anything but straightforward. Instead of being a simple, singular entity, it was fragmented into multiple parts: the Ka, the Ba, the Ache, and more, each with its own role in destiny after death. Keeping this complicated soul intact required an elaborate set of ceremonies, including the mummification process. This wasn't just about preserving the body. It was about ensuring that the soul's connection to the physical world remained intact, so it wouldn't get lost in the underworld. Sounds rational, right? But then you discover that they believed your heart would literally be weighed against a feather to determine your fate. Yes, a feather. If your heart was heavier than that feather, meaning you had lived a morally unbalanced life, it was game over. Your soul would be devoured by a terrifying creature known as Ammit, part lion, part crocodile, and part hippopotamus. Talk about a chilling end to your journey. However, if you passed the test, you'd be welcomed into the afterlife by Osiris, the god of the dead. With stakes that high, it's easy to see why death was taken so seriously. Now, here's where things get truly insane. Pharaohs and elites poured fortunes into preparing for this journey, building tombs that were often bigger and more extravagant than the palaces they inhabited while alive. Take the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example. It wasn't just a marvel of architecture, it was the ultimate death chamber. Constructed over 4,500 years ago, it stands as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But it's also one of the most extreme examples of how far the Egyptians went to secure their place in the afterlife. Welcome to Blessovia Science TV, where we take you on an exhilarating journey through the cosmos and unravel the mysteries of science. We are excited to offer you the opportunity to become a valued member of our ever-growing community of cosmic enthusiasts and knowledge seekers. Exclusive access to cosmic content. As a member of Blessovia Science TV, you will gain exclusive access to a treasure trove of cosmic content, including documentaries, interviews with leading scientists, space missions updates, and awe-inspiring visualizations of the universe, live Q, and sessions with experts. Your membership will grant you the chance to participate in live Q and sessions with renowned scientists, astronomers, and space explorers. Get your burning questions answered by those who push the boundaries of human knowledge. Embark on a journey that spans the cosmos and join us in unraveling the secrets of the universe. Become a Blessovia Science TV member today, and together we will reach for the stars. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget to leave your comment.